In today's world, people are more disconnected than ever. Anxiety, loneliness, and depression are rampant, and young people are desperate for meaningful relationships. From the beginning, Edge has created opportunities for people to develop in their personal, professional, and spiritual lives.
My relationship with my mentor is awesome. Shout out to Jason. He's there for me in terms of any questions I have, both professionally and personally. Earlier this year, my dad had COVID, and he was one of the first people to check in with me regarding that. So it's nice to know that he cares about me as a whole human being.
Edge continues to provide ways for you to develop as a whole person, to grow yourself, and to find your role in your community and make an impact. Edge offers a variety of programs and events to provide community and safe spaces for whole person development to occur. Edge groups, Edge work, and Edge events are our current product offerings, but we are always looking to expand as a way to better serve our community and to be able to positively impact more lives. We believe that people grow better together. We are all made for community. Once you have expressed interest in participating in an Edge group, we will pair you with 5 to 7 other young professionals and a carefully selected Edge-trained mentor. And together, you will navigate life, including personal growth, career development, and faith. Edge group participants commit to a 1-hour virtual gathering with their group every other week for 1 year. And because Edge Groups is a virtual program, you can experience the power of intergenerational mentoring from anywhere.
I'm Toni McEwen. I work for Corteva AgriScience, and I lead our global HR service centers. I do think I have the best Edge group because these women are constantly showing up for one another. So while I'm technically the mentor, there's a lot of moments where I sit back and I don't say a lot, and they just speak into each other's lives.
Edge at Work is a 1-year cohort-based program that focuses strictly on personal and professional development. Leveraging a curriculum that we co-created with Butler University, emerging leaders are provided a safe space to focus on their own personal and professional development. We focus on everything from mental wellness to overcoming failure and self-limiting behaviors to receiving feedback and managing change. Edge Events is where our entire community comes together. Events are the glue that bring folks from all of our programs together to share life, learn from each other, and address relevant topics within our lives and communities.
I struggled in my early 20s with figuring out you have to take ownership of your career and choices. And I think Edge really helped me gain clarity to make those choices.
I wanted to get involved because I frankly wish I would have had something like this 20 years ago when I started my career.
If you are a young person who is looking for deeper connection and community, Edge is for you. For those more seasoned, we are always in need of strong mentors. Your life experiences should be shared with others. If you are a business owner or executive and would like to provide a unique opportunity to your employees, Edge at Work would aid in their own personal and professional development journeys. Learn more about how we can partner with you at edgementoring.org. Our first speaker for today is Danielle Koch. Danielle is an illustrator, social justice advocate, and entrepreneur who makes art designed to encourage faith, inspire justice, and guide others through loving their neighbors well. Through her art, Dani makes complex issues more digestible and provides practical ways to help others make a difference in the world. Ann O'Brien is with Dani to chat about her meteoric rise to popularity and the impact of her work. Ann, take it away.
Hello, we are so excited to be with Danielle Koch here for EdgeX this week. Danielle is also known as Oh Happy Dani on Instagram, and she creates art and words about loving God and our neighbors well. We are so thrilled to be here with you today. Yeah. And as we lean into the EdgeX theme this year about look inward, focus outward, and go onward, we are excited to just hear about your story and just sort of what is your journey and some more about your work.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and to talk with you. This is going to be so fun.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. So Danielle, you have become a viral sensation overnight, it seems. And your artwork has really been touching the world. So why don't we start a little bit there? Tell us about your journey so far.
Sure. Yeah. So it's definitely been insane. One that I've never ever could have expected or anticipated. But yes, my journey with illustrating, a lot of people are surprised to know that I actually didn't start actively illustrating until January of this year. I draw for fun, and I've done that for all my life. And then I'm a graphic designer and social media strategist by day. But it wasn't until my parents got me an iPad for Christmas where I was like, oh, that's fun. I can play with all of those apps I've always heard about. So I started drawing in January. And I did a piece about Martin Luther King Jr. and about his message and how I feel as though sometimes, it could be watered down or taken out of context based on who he actually was as a civil rights leader. So I kind of made an illustration that spoke to that, and it was the very first one to be shared outside of my family and friends. And now we're here. I get to talk to you. So
yes, I'm so thankful.
Yeah, it's been a wild journey for sure.
Wow. Yeah, so tell us a little bit more. So that was the first image that really took off, and
yes.
what were you doing with Instagram before, and what are you doing now?
Okay, well then in that case, I'll back up a little bit. I was working at a special events agency for about 2 years. I had graduated college with a hospitality major, business administration degree, and I thought that I was going to go into event planning. And I got the job at the agency, but I was doing marketing and graphic design. So I was like, oh, this will just be my way in, but event planning is what I really want to do. And then I found out that it's not what I really want to do. So I worked for a little while and quit my job in August of 2019, which was the wildest thing. I never planned for it, but it felt so right when I did it because I was like, I could do this myself. I could be an entrepreneur. I could start my own business. So I started a design social media agency. And so I was working on that for a few months. And then in January, around the same time that I launched that first illustration, I launched my business. So they were happening in tandem. So after that first Martin Luther King graphic, I realized that there were people that were open to the conversation who otherwise might not have been willing to talk about race in that context. So I decided maybe I can keep illustrating and making the hard things look pretty, and hopefully that would bring more people in. So Black History Month was right around the corner, February. And so I said, I'm just gonna do a series and I'm gonna draw a whole bunch of infographics, and I am not Picasso, but I'm gonna just make it work with what I have. And so I talked about seeing in color, I talked about microaggressions, a lot of the more nuanced conversations within the larger conversation of race and racial reconciliation. And by the end of that month, I had about 10,000 followers from the 790 that I had when I first started out. So I was like, wow, that's so exciting. I was over the moon because I was excited to see that people were that willing to engage in this dialogue. So yeah, and then I kept going from there.
That is so great to see. Well, it's been inspiring to watch. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've been seeing and what you are hoping to sort of impact with your work?
Yes, so it's really exciting to witness the part that the art is playing in people's personal conversations in their day-to-day lives. I will say, after Black History Month was over and I was about 10,000 friends, I witnessed the tragic death of Ahmaud Arbery, and the police brutality conversation started to pick up again. And I made an illustration based on a quote by Kamala Harris that said, "Exercising while Black should not be a death sentence." And that was the first piece to actually go viral on Instagram. And it was shocking to me because it was way more simplistic than my other things. I was like, oh, you guys aren't trying to see all this other stuff. But what I noticed was people were appreciative and receptive of all of it, but they were super open to the idea of this new conversation because it was more simplistic in the way it was presented. So people began to take that art piece and use it in their own conversations. And they were saying, hi, this is my Instagram and I'm sharing this art piece to let you guys know that I see what's going on. I understand that racial injustice is an issue and I want to start the conversation with my audience. So that was amazing to see the transition of people going from sharing the art to like posting it themselves and actively starting the conversations using the artwork as a gate opener, I could say. So that was amazing. And from then on, I started to see a lot of people who were using the art to start the conversation, using the art to do their own self-inner work and learning about the topic for themselves. And I got messages of people saying, I never expected to be able to have this conversation with my family, or I never expected to see the role that I play in the conversation at large when it comes to racial injustice. So that was incredible to witness.
So you've said, a little bit about having those hard conversations, and that you have been one to go ahead and have those hard conversations. And then one of the things within your artwork is sort of doing the inner work and the outer work about those hard conversations. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, definitely. So one thing that I was noticing as people came to my page and were sharing my content with their own audiences on social media, I began to feel an increased responsibility, not just to create and produce this art that was informative, but also to say, hey, this is only the beginning. I really believe that it's important that this art not only serves as an introduction to the conversation, but prompts you to do more of your own research and inner reflections. So when I talk about microaggressions, when I talk about seeing in color and implicit bias, that these aren't just things that you're like, oh yes, now I know that these exist. But it's, okay, how can I look at my own life, look at the interactions that I have with my community, Black people, people of color that I already know and do life with, how can I better serve them and better bring up this conversation within my sphere of influence? So that's definitely the inner work part. And then when it comes to outer work, I say, okay, you've got the tools, you've done the self-reflection, and you're not going to wait until you're perfect before you get involved and get engaged. So I would say, as you're continuing that inner work, also be doing the outer work of, like I said, the hard conversations, the calling government officials and writing in to talk about policy and contacting your school boards and things like that. Like, what can you actively do in the here and now? What petitions can you sign to really take change where you are? And so I would never say that inner work is the first step and outer work is the second step. I would say that both run in tandem with each other, and you don't have to wait till you have it all figured out or feel like you've got a hold of the conversation to dive in and really make a change.
Absolutely. Well, that is so similar to just the concept of what we're talking about here at EdgeX, of the look inward, focus outward, and go onward. Yeah. And so one of the things that we talk about is the value of community as part of that and as part of growth and impact. So what have you found? What role has community played with you, and especially in your career and your journey, but also on this topic as well, and how we can engage in community?
Definitely. So it's exciting when people ask me about my process. One thing that I always let them know is before I post anything, I'm sending this art to my family. I'm sending this art to my close friends and saying, hey, first of all, are you understanding what I'm trying to say here? Does it make sense? But also, how's my tone here? Am I coming across as aggressive or a little too authoritative, even though, those things are often stereotypes that are projected onto Black women in and of itself. So I don't always want to camp out there, but I do want to say, hey, I have the opportunity to make sure that I'm being as compassionate and loving yet firm as I can. And I would never want that to take away from the work that I'm trying to do. So community has been huge in that sense of having second eyes and third eyes to look over the work and say, hey, this is great. Or, hey, maybe we can rework this so your audience can better see the heart behind what it is you're trying to say in this area. So community in this aspect has been huge for me and really helpful.
Good. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the series that we saw that you did was the Allyship collection. You have done a few different prints even about that. So we loved that. And can you tell us a little bit more about just the ideas behind those messages?
Sure. So there are a couple of pieces involved in that collection. One being Anatomy of an Ally. And that was born out of back when I had maybe about 800 followers and people were simply asking like, hey, I'm a white person who wants to know what I can do to get started here. And I was saying, okay, here are a couple of steps that I would advise or encourage any white person who's new to the conversation to take, even when you're just starting out. So for Anatomy of an Ally, I talked about, eyes to identify things and ears to listen to things. And I was basically just saying, make sure you're opening your heart up to the plight of the oppressed in your community. Make sure you're listening to the conversations that are being had. Make sure you're assessing your own internal implicit bias. And it just pointed out a couple different features that I felt like would be cool to notice and take inventory of before jumping into the conversation. So that was one of them. Another one is Worthy. It's my personal favorite and a lot of other people's personal favorite as well. And it's just an illustration of different colored arms, representing different ethnicities, and just saying that we are all worthy regardless of our background, regardless of our race. But I also wanted to speak to the original intent of that, because when I first created it, it was speaking to more of colorism, which is an issue within the Black community itself, where folks with lighter skin tones are often seen and as closer to white or white passing, and the struggles that they face in society are different than those of darker skinned people. So that piece was originally meant to speak to that, but as I saw how it grew to help other people, saying, hey, all people are worthy of love, acceptance, and to be fought for. And I didn't have a problem with the way that it morphed, because I felt as though it was helpful in illustrating the larger issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I had one more. Yes, reading the signals. It was a traffic light talking about how to read the signals in navigating race conversations. So I had the red, yellow, and green light. And the red light was listen, I think. The second one was talking about amplify. And then the third one was talking about speaking out. So I said, listen, amplify the voices of Black people and people of color, and then speak out when you have an opportunity to fight against injustice or stand up against things that are wrong. So those were the 3 pieces that I first started out with in this collection.
Oh, wow. Well, that is so just helpful. And one of the things that I have seen that you shared was talking about some obstacles that some people may face. And I just love that the artwork that you create is so educational and helpful. And one of the obstacles you had mentioned was paralysis, because of fear of that, and or just some other challenges like information overload. So how do we address that? How do we overcome that?
Yes, so there were 2 big failures that I think people were afraid to make, or 2 big roadblocks that people were afraid of. One being failure, and the other being, I just am being bombarded by so much information, I genuinely don't know what the next step to take is. So I attempted to speak to both of those things by saying, well, if you are struggling with information overload, view it this way. View it as a funnel, and at the top, you're having all of the general information that you're taking in about the conversation of racial reconciliation and racial injustice. And you are fielding through all these different things and just trying to get your bearings. And then we get down to topical research. After you've come in contact with all these things, what can you get more specific about? Maybe there's an issue that you read about that pricked your heart, and you want to dive deeper into that specific topic. How can you do that? And then after topical research, I talked about pairing your passion with a cause. So what are you already passionate about in your day-to-day life that you can align with a cause that you're researching? So for example, I talk about the motherhood mortality rate and that issue in the Black community where Black mothers are more likely to die during childbirth because of racism in the public health space. So for someone who is a mother, is passionate about motherhood, maybe you have a blog where you talk about being a mom. How can you have an article that shines a light on the motherhood mortality crisis? That's a way that you can take the cause, pair it with the passion you already have, and make a difference in that area. And I just think that's a beautiful thing. And so the very last piece is aligned action, which is basically what I just described. After you put all those pieces together, actually doing that thing that you've researched and decided that you were created to do.
Wow.
So that's how I would talk about that.
Danielle, it's just so inspiring to see how you are really discovering your passions and finding your purpose and calling through that. You sort of touched a little bit on just some practical ways. Can you kind of delve in a little bit further? I know you have talked to some people on Instagram about finding your calling. Can you kind of give us some different things, some suggestions for people who are looking to find what their purpose might be?
Yeah, definitely. I like talking about this and prefacing it by saying there is this Japanese ideology that I came across in college, I believe, that talked about how purpose is at the intersection of a whole bunch of different things. And those things can look different for different people. So for me, I chose to identify, okay, I believe that purpose lies at the intersection of your passion, your skill set, and a perceived need in the world. I make it super simple for myself, and I found that was very simple for other people to digest. And so I like to say, for me, for example, I was passionate about justice, racial reconciliation, of course, but justice in all forms. And I had a skill set in design and illustrating. And then I saw a perceived need for people to understand what's going on and make the complex seem more accessible and digestible. So I put that all together and I said, okay, a way that I can walk out and fulfill my purpose in this season, because it's open to change at any time. But in this season, I can get on Instagram and draw some illustrated infographics that are simple enough to explain a complex idea, but tough enough for people to say, okay, this made me want to think about this and actually do something to make a difference. So that's how I found my purpose in this season. And I think that it's a really great starting blueprint for anyone who wants to take the opportunity to search that out for themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And throughout this process, Danielle, have you found just any challenges that you have, been working to overcome? What's some of the ups and downs of this ride that you're on?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I would say one that comes top of mind would be imposter syndrome, because I looked around and I saw all these incredible artists already occupying the space that I was occupying on social media. And for me, being a Black illustrator was just not common in the spaces that I saw illustration happening on Instagram specifically. So part of me was like, do I really have a place here? And then another part of me was like, am I even an artist? Because my style is just so different from a lot of people. But what I had to realize was, one, there is a place for me here, and I'm not better or worse than any other illustrators. I'm just different. And once I accepted that, it was a lot easier for me to keep going and see the role that I had to play. And then it also helped with imposter syndrome. I still deal with it sometimes, like being invited to come speak at an amazing event like this. I'm just like, me? Are you sure? But yeah, I'm consistently affirmed and reminded that I do have a place here. And the story that I'm living out is one that's not anything I could have pictured for myself, but one that I am deserving of. So that's what I try to continuously remind myself of.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable about that. And it's just something that I think that is actually pretty common, and it's just so helpful to say it out loud. And so tell me a little bit about the importance, just about self-care and positive self-talk. It sounds like you have that going on. So tell us what some good tricks might be to help us overcome those barriers.
Sure. So when it comes to my self-care journey in and of itself, I talked recently about how I had an episode of Burnout where I was going too hard for too long. And I eventually had to get on Instagram and say, hey, I'm going to be gone for a few more days. I've been gone for a few already. I just need to take better care of myself. And I just haven't been doing that. And in that, I learned not only the importance of taking care of my own self and watching my physical health, but also my mindset. How am I thinking through the work that I do? Am I compartmentalizing the work into what other people would consider a job, or have I let it consume my whole life because it was a hobby before that I loved? So I really had to navigate, okay, I'm going to compartmentalize this. I'm going to be willing to set it aside and do other things that speak to other parts of me and my self-care, my personal development, and just really pouring into myself more. And that's been really helpful in navigating these seasons, especially when burnout is a possibility all the time. I definitely want to minimize that by taking as much care of myself as I can.
Yeah, that's so great. So Danielle, in summary, can you tell me just sort of what you would hope that people are taking away from your artwork and some of your messages today even?
Yeah. One thing that I would hope is that when someone sees a piece of art, that it's more than just that to them, that it makes them think and causes them to say, how can I apply this to my life beyond just liking and commenting on it? And what's encouraging to me and what keeps me going is seeing those messages of people that are saying, because of this, I'm now ready to face this in my life and no longer ignore it. And that's the biggest ask that I have for anyone that sees it. Are you willing to see this, apply it to your life, and no longer ignore it? Because if so, then I feel like my job is done. That's what I would say.
That's so great. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann O'Brien, and I will be hosting today's Q&A with Danielle Koch. The gift of being able to hold edX virtually has allowed us to access our keynote speakers like we've never been able to before. And so if you would like to ask a question, click on the Q&A button below and type in your question, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Before we launch into our Q&A, I would like to thank again our presenting sponsors, MedExcel, Lucas Oil, and all of our corporate partners. And it's because of them that we are able to have edX and be able to offer this unique live Q&A opportunity. I would like to introduce everyone to Danielle Koch. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today. The timing of our discussion today could really not be better, considering the rough year that we've been having with literally and figuratively people talking over each other, not only politicians, but people within our communities. And so I just wanted to, before we dove in, just mention that earlier today in our program, you had shared a little bit about your early on Instagram growth, but I know after today, so many people watching you, that your growth, you are at 470,000 followers, and I'm sure even more after today. And so for those of you who haven't yet, pick up your phone and start following Oh Happy Danny on Instagram. And we wanted to highlight the fabulous piece that you created for edX 2020, which we have here actually right behind us in our headquarters today. So we are just thrilled that you were able to depict our theme this year so well. And we are so just thankful for your gift of time and your talent. So we just continue to be inspired by your artwork and your Instagram posts, Danny. One of your recent posts features the quote, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears," by Nelson Mandela. Can you talk to us about that post and its meaning to you?
Sure. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for having me. And I'm super excited that we get to do this live Q&A, get to talk to everybody. This is really fun. But yes, let's talk about that post. I made that because I was feeling what I'm sure a lot of other people are feeling in this season, just a lot of unrest, a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, and for many people, a lot of fear. And part of what's helpful for me has been transitioning from a mindset of optimism, maybe like blind optimism, I should say, because I am still very optimistic, but moving away from blind optimism and toxic positivity into more of a mindset of hope. And that's been helpful for me because hope is simply, to me, believing that what's to come is better than what's behind us. And when it comes to tackling the choices that we make every day, I love the quote by Nelson Mandela when he says, "Let your choices, be a product of your hope and not your fear," because it's very easy to have all these fears and make decisions based on them. So, for example, we can talk about voting. We're right in the middle of the debates, right? Voting, some of us are voting for one candidate or the other out of fear. And for me, it's like, what if I approach these hard decisions saying, I'm hopeful that by taking this action, this positive outcome can arise from it. And so that is the posture I'm taking when making this decision. So even with other examples, like taking action in any area of your life, like raising money for a fundraiser for a cause that you believe in. I'm raising this money not out of fear that if I don't do this, horrible things are going to happen to this cause or this mission or this organization, but I'm doing it out of hope that I can make a difference by using my resources in my circle to serve this area and fulfill this need. So that is kind of the mindset behind that, just switching from fear to hope, because we can't pull out of the well of fear in a sustainable way.
That's so good. And so, Danny, tell me, what are you hopeful for right now?
In general? Well, one thing that's top of mind is I'm hopeful that as a society, we are becoming more open to having difficult conversations. Like I said before, even in the talk, it's really cool to see that even though a lot of us still differ in many different ways, many of us are starting to realize that, hey, we disagree on some things. And some people don't just disagree for the sake of disagreement. And it's not even always about being right. Some people just want to be heard. And I think in these conversations, we can really salvage and grow a lot of our relationships when we come from a posture of listening, and instead of always trying to be right or be, the smartest person in the room or the loudest person in the room. So I'm hopeful that we're getting better at navigating these conversations with a little bit more grace, a little bit more hope, of course, and mindfulness that, hey, you might not agree with me, but I'm hopeful that for the sake of our relationship, we can continue to dive into these hard topics with hopes that we at least find some common ground.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I love the hope that you do impart to your followers. I know that you recently shared some interactions that you had with some of your followers on Instagram, where you asked people, what does your heart need to hear? And you provided them with inspiring messages and words of affirmation. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what made you want to do that, and what kind of your takeaway was from that?
Oh, sure. Whenever I'm feeling the most empty, or I'm starting to feel really drained, one thing that I do is find a way to give. And I know it's said that we can't pour from an empty cup, and that's true in a lot of different ways. But I find that I'm the most encouraged when I take the time to encourage someone else. I'm filled with the most hope when I have a moment to inject hope and positivity into someone else. It's just really helpful for me. So I wanted to ask my audience, in the midst of such a scary time, a lot of people just need a little bit of inspiration, and it's something anybody could do. I literally was like, okay, people don't want to necessarily hear me talk for an hour about how things can be better. How can I speak to as many individual situations as possible while not taking all day, So I posted this story, how can I encourage you in 15 seconds? Drop a statement in the question box, a couple words about how you're feeling right now in this season, and I'll do my best to encourage you in 15 seconds or less. And it was such a beautiful thing that started to happen, because people were able to just say, hey, I feel like I'm failing as a parent because I don't want to raise children in a society like we're in right now, where there's just so much turmoil and unrest. And I'm able to say, hey, first of all, you're doing an amazing job. We're doing the best we can. Children are a gift from God. And yes, it's super crazy and scary out there, but we've been presented with such a beautiful opportunity to raise children who care about love and justice and loving our neighbors as ourselves. So isn't that a beautiful opportunity? And so it goes into the whole flipping fear on its head and looking for the hope. And it was helpful for me. I've heard it was helpful for other people. And so I think it's cool. We can all find opportunities to encourage each other in our day-to-day life, regardless of the size of the platforms that we have.
Oh, that is so true. Another illustration of yours was a very specific image that called out reasons to be proud of yourself. Can you share the story of how you created that and why you picked those certain reasons and why you think it resonated with so many?
Yeah, sure. I love following optimistic accounts on Instagram and social media, and positive accounts as well. But for me, I have a really hard time drawing something positive just for the sake of being positive. I always need to find a deeper meaning or a way to actually connect with the art instead of just cranking out content. There's enough of that out there anyway. So I was thinking, what are some accomplishments that people can celebrate right now in the midst of feeling like everything's going wrong, or we might be not doing everything as perfectly as we would like? So I was thinking, okay, I think people should be proud of themselves for having hard conversations. You should be proud of yourself for finding and using your voice, for creating healthy boundaries. And I just started to think of things that really do have a strong, powerful meaning, and things that people should celebrate, even when it looks like there's not much to celebrate right now. So I wanted to put that out there. And I'm very literal. So I'm like, yeah, reasons to be proud of yourself. Here are actual awards that you should give yourself if they existed. And you should celebrate that. And so I think that's important to remember too. Like, even in the midst of your imperfection, there is so much progress. And that's always worth celebrating, in my opinion.
Oh, I love that. You have so much perspective and wisdom, and yet are so young. Where do you draw this wisdom and perspectives from?
Oh, thank you. I don't know. So I would definitely say that my faith in God, first and foremost, is what keeps me going and what keeps me hopeful. I could also say that I do a lot of listening before. If you ever see me say or draw something, know that I sat with it for a while first. And there's a lot of
noise, and there's a lot of things that you can draw from and say, oh, I need to talk about that, or oh, I need to have an opinion. And for me, it's not always that, it's about who can I listen to and learn from that knows more about this than me? How can I avoid just trying to react in the moment and sit with perspective and weigh things? And yeah, so for me, I do a lot of listening and I do a lot of waiting. I don't just jump the gun, especially when there's so many different opinions and so much nuance and complexities to all of these conversations. It would not serve me or my audience well to just sway with every, wind. So yeah, I think I do a lot of listening, I do a lot of reading, and I'm very patient. I'm slow to speak.
That's so good. I have a question about social media. So how do you find a good balance, especially if someone is involved as you are on social media, of sort of finding the positives of being engaged versus sort of protecting yourself from some of the negatives that have been coming to light and are being discussed more, specifically about how some users have experienced increased prevalence of negative emotions or mental health issues? What kind of rules, or do you have rules or boundaries to set for that?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think something that a lot of us should be more mindful of, because it's dangerous out here in social media land. When all of this first started happening, I had maybe 700 followers. And in 1 week, 300,000 people showed up. And I'm like, literally, what do I do? The pressure was enormous at that moment, because not only did I want to keep creating, but I felt this increased responsibility to have to educate hundreds of thousands of people to go beyond social media, go beyond sharing and reposting and actually doing something and taking action in their spheres of influence. So I was experiencing a lot of burnout very quickly. I also was being just abused across the internet by so many people who were determined to misunderstand and just also didn't share my opinions. Not everyone, likes to have cordial conversation. So I had to deal with a lot of that. And I had to decide very quickly, either I'm going to allow myself to succumb to all of this pressure and consistently create for other people's consumption, or I could view the social media space as a gift and a platform, of course, but also something that did not require my undivided attention. And so people underestimate how much goes into creating a piece, because I will sit with a very difficult piece. We talked about this. I will sit with a very difficult piece and I'll do all this research, and it's extremely overwhelming, emotionally taxing. I'll be crying. It'll take me hours. Then I post it for people to dissect and rip apart and have conversations over. The conversations these days are very cordial, but before, they weren't always. So I have to brace myself to know, like, hey, I'm creating this with fully knowing that people are going to be able to dissect it however they wish. But today, I also know that, one, not every disagreement is an attack. I also know that some people do just want to learn and know more. And I am not obligated to consistently engage, especially when it becomes damaging to my own mental health. So I take frequent breaks. I don't always respond to everything. And yeah, I'm not controlled by a number of followers or current events. I'm content in my gift and the timing that I choose to create content.
Oh, that's so good. Our next question is from Monte. You and your work has caught fire with hundreds of thousands hanging on your every post. Where do you see this journey taking you?
Where do I see it taking me? I don't even expect it to take me here. Like, I'm here at Edge getting to talk to Anne. Like, didn't expect that. One of my dreams is to have a collection of home decor that people can put in their houses and in their homes and say, like, oh, this is a conversation starter piece that I can share with people in my life. When they enter into my home, they'll know that this is what I stand for. Here's an illustration of the values that we share as a household. So that's something that I want to do one day. But I also, I guess, would love to dive deeper into very specific topics and perhaps create more unique, specialized content and that I can take outside of social media and, you know, be able to walk with people in their journeys more specifically. I have no idea how that looks. And I'm truly just trusting God every single day to help me figure this thing out. But I'm hopeful that whatever is next for me is going to be what's needed from me for my community in this time. So that's where my mind is. I don't even know if that was a good enough answer to that great question.
Oh, I think it's exciting. That is so great.
Yeah.
And so as you realized that you wanted to activate your skill set with art to connect people, to connect with people, how did you get started? What emotions came with that? And can you help us know how to get started with our individual skill sets in making a difference?
Oh, sure. So one thing that I say often is that art is not the end all be all for me. It was simply a medium. I have always been super outspoken about social justice issues specifically, and that intersection of justice and faith. And so when I got an iPad to help me streamline other parts of my business, I started doing digital illustration for fun. So when I was doing it, I was playing around with different apps on my iPad, just honestly for fun. And I noticed that there was a need that I could fill with that piece of art. So I just started experimenting with it and putting stuff out in January. That's how I started. And I would say, I talk about purpose a lot. I probably talked about it in the talk, but I think it's super important to identify, you know, what you're passionate about in the season and look at your skills and say, how can I get plugged into my current purpose based on my passions, my skill set, and a need that I'm seeing in the world today around me. And one thing that about purpose that's great is that it's flexible. You're not tied down to a very specific thing that you have to do for the rest of your life. Mediums can change. Your passions can ebb and flow, which is super exciting because it's fluid, but also it takes the pressure off to feel like you have to have a perfect outlet for your creativity and walk out your purpose in a very specific way. So I would say get creative with it. Decide, what can I look into right now, that a cause that could use my attention, or what free time do I have that I can learn new things, play with some of my pre-existing skill sets, and try something new. That's what I'd say. And you'd be surprised what can come out of it when you're experimenting.
Oh, I love that. And so it's kind of related. A question from Lee. What helps you fill your cup and inspires your creativity?
What helps me fill my cup? Well, I think engaging in community is very helpful. I find that to be very filling because there are times when I don't have the words, I don't have the strength, I don't even know what to say or do, but there's a community who has needs that they vocalize. They are there to support, they're there to encourage. And so I'm always very inspired and fulfilled to say something or talk about something or do something based on the feedback that I'm getting from my community, because I'm the listener first. So that helps me. And then the part that fills me is the fact that these are such supportive people in my life who are consistently pouring back into me. I had a problem with having community consistently because I'm very good on my own. So, but I realize more and more what comes with community: accountability and trust, and having a mentor has always been super helpful. And, you know, my mentor, Natalie, having her to speak into my life and help guide me in different directions and areas is also something that's helpful and filling for me when I feel myself getting empty.
Oh, that is so good. John asks, how do you navigate negative comments and keep your "Oh Happy Danny" positive vibe?
Negative comments. People can be so mean sometimes. But one thing that I noticed and had to realize is people are not always mean. Sometimes, like I said earlier, people want to be heard, or people don't realize that sometimes they're actually interacting with a human being on the other side of the screen. So for me, when those comments were first coming in, I would get so anxious. But now, what I did, especially on Instagram, where I spend the most of my time, is I have filtered my comments to where you can't comment on my page unless you are a follower. or I follow you. And that's not to block out all negativity, because disagreements still happen on the daily in my community. It's only because I welcome dialogue from guests in my home, not trespassers and people who just want to bust the door down to say something mean. And you'd be surprised how much that filters out, because not only are we creating space for safe, healthy dialogue where healthy disagreements can and do still occur, but I'm preventing verbal abuse, I'm preventing trolling, and people who don't have my best interests at heart and honestly could care less who I am or where my heart is. So filtering comments has been a dream. And then even on websites or platforms where I can't filter comments, just knowing when to engage and when to not engage, and allowing people to say what they'd like to say within reason, as long as it's not abusive or tearing anyone else down. And just knowing that my worth, my identity doesn't come from these people. And yeah, I just don't let it get deep down in me. I let it stay on the surface, because a lot of these people are not in community with me anyway. They don't know me, I don't know them. So I can't give it too much stress. That's what I do.
That's so good, Danielle. That's great advice. What pieces do you have in the works? Is there anything that you're excited about upcoming?
Well, I'm getting ready for my very first fall launch of prints and posters. So I'm actually designing a bunch of brand new things that haven't been posted yet, with a fall feel, but also I think it's important for me to highlight the fact that with a change in season, a lot of people are finding relief and escape from the fact that fall is here. We're about to celebrate the holidays and it's going to be just a beautiful time. But I also want to gently encourage people to not give up on the fight for justice, fight for equality in many different aspects, when we get lost in the comfort that come with a new change in season. So I'd like to make some pieces that speak to that and hopefully encourage people to keep this kind of conversation top of mind, because what we don't want to happen is to become lackadaisical and apathetic to the point where when another horrible injustice occurs, because it will, it's inevitable, we live in a fallen, broken world. When another issue like that does occur, we're not caught off guard and oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to react. Instead, we're grounded and we're consistent in the work that we do. So we are prepared to maybe not have all the answers, but to effectively engage in a positive way because we haven't given up.
That's
something that I'm working on. Long story short, that's a couple of things that I'm working on, especially as we get into fall.
Well, that's exciting. Well, I can't wait to follow along. And so can you share, how do people explore your works and how can folks buy your pieces?
Oh, sure. So you can find me at Oh Happy Danny literally everywhere. We love branding, am I right? So Oh Happy Danny everywhere. OhHappyDanny.com is also where you can get some prints. And posters are coming soon, so that's going to be fun. But yeah, if you just want to find me on Instagram at Oh Happy Danny, send me a message that you were here today. I'd actually love to talk to you and say thanks. So yeah, thanks.
I love that. And so one of the things you were sharing today in our programming is that you took the leap to follow your dreams, to start your own thing. So leaving the agency that you worked for and creating your own design and social media agency. And so can you talk about how you knew it was time to do that? If anyone else is kind of like, what should I be doing? Tell us about your story with that. Looks like we might be having a connection issue here. We'll give it a minute. Looks like we lost Danielle. That's okay. It's such a pleasure talking with her, and we will just make sure that we keep following Danielle, and we are just so happy. We were close to the end of our program today anyway, so we'll just a big thank you to Danielle Koch